Did you know that three major economies in modern history have followed the exact same path to total currency collapse? Germany in 1923, Zimbabwe in 2008, and Venezuela in 2018. The events were separated by decades and continents, yet the pattern was identical. Today, I'm going to show you how that same pattern is unfolding right now, on a global scale. This isn't a prediction from a crystal ball. It's a model based on historical fact and simple mathematics. And what it suggests is that we are closer to a worldwide currency crisis than anyone is willing to admit. So what exactly is hyperinflation? It's not just prices going up. The technical definition is when inflation exceeds 50% per month. At that rate, money loses half its value every 30 days. Imagine your savings, your salary, everything you've worked for, being systematically wiped out. It's a process that destroys the middle class, pulverizes savings, and can lead to complete societal breakdown. History has shown us this isn't a theoretical risk. It's a recurring nightmare, and it always follows a predictable four-stage model. Let's break it down. Stage 1 is the activation phase. It all starts with a major crisis. This could be a war, a pandemic, a financial crash, anything that blows a massive hole in the government's budget. Suddenly, the government is spending way more money than it's taking in through taxes. This creates a huge deficit, a financial black hole that needs to be filled. In Germany, it was the crushing war reparations after World War I. For Zimbabwe, it was a combination of land reform policies that crippled their agricultural economy and costly military interventions. In Venezuela, it was the collapse of oil prices, their primary source of national income. For the world today, think about the massive, unprecedented spending in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic lockdowns. This was our global activation event. This brings us to stage 2, the choice. When faced with a massive budget deficit, a government has three options. 1. Drastically cut spending. This is politically unpopular. Think cutting social programs, pensions, or public sector jobs. 2. Significantly raise taxes. Also deeply unpopular and can stifle economic activity. Or 3. The seemingly easy way out. They can just create new money out of thin air to pay their bills. This is what we call printing money, or, in modern terms, quantitative easing. It doesn't require political courage or tough decisions. It's the path of least resistance. And in every historical case of hyperinflation, from the Weimar Republic to modern Venezuela, the government chose to print the money. They chose the printing press over fiscal responsibility. Stage 3 is justification. No government just comes out and says, "We're going to destroy our currency." Instead, they tell a story. They insist the money printing is a temporary emergency measure. They'll say it's necessary to stimulate the economy, provide liquidity, or avoid a depression. The most common phrase you'll hear is, "This time is different." They'll argue that their economy is unique, that they have the tools to control the situation, and that the old rules don't apply. In Germany, they claimed they needed to pay striking workers. In Zimbabwe, they said it was to fund government operations. Today, we hear central bankers and politicians assure us that their sophisticated monetary policies can manage the inflation they are creating. It's the same justification, just wrapped in more complex jargon. The story is always the same. It's temporary, it's controlled, and this time, we know what we're doing. And that leads us to the final, terrifying stage. Stage 4. Acceleration. Here's where the model becomes a death spiral. Initially, the new money creates a temporary feeling of prosperity. But soon, all that extra cash chasing the same amount of goods and services starts pushing prices up. As inflation begins to rise, the government's costs also increase. Their tax revenues, however, are collected based on past, less inflated values. This means their budget deficit actually gets worse. Their only solution, you guessed it, print even more money, and faster. This creates a vicious feedback loop. More printing leads to higher inflation, which leads to a bigger deficit, which requires even more printing. At this point, the process becomes exponential. Public confidence in the currency evaporates. People rush to spend their money the second they get it, before it loses more value. The currency's value plummets not just day by day, but hour by hour. This is the death spiral. It ends with the complete collapse of the currency, where it becomes worth less than the paper it's printed on. Now, let's connect this historical model to our present reality. Since 2020, the major economies of the world, the US, the European Union, Japan, China, have engaged in the largest money printing experiment in human history. The amount of new currency created to deal with the pandemic and its aftermath dwarfs the combined totals printed by Germany, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela in their crises. We have experienced a global activation event, Stage 1. And what was the choice? Stage 2. Overwhelmingly, governments chose to print money on an unprecedented scale. We've heard endless justifications, Stage 3, about how it's necessary and that central banks have it under control. The narrative of this time is different as playing on a global loop, so the critical question is, are we now in Stage 4, the acceleration phase? Let's look at the warning signs. First, a massive expansion of the money supply globally. It's already happened. Second, out of control government budget deficits. Most major nations are running deficits that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, with no realistic plan to ever pay back the debt. Third, rising inflation. The official numbers you hear on the news are already high, but many argue they are significantly understated. The real cost of living, food, energy, housing has skyrocketed for ordinary people far beyond what the official consumer price index suggests. Fourth, look at asset price inflation. Stock markets hitting all-time highs and real estate bubbles forming in many countries. Not because the underlying economy is booming, but because a flood of newly printed money has to go somewhere. It's a monetary illusion, not genuine wealth creation. And fifth, and perhaps most importantly, is the loss of confidence in fiat currency itself. Why do you think there's been a massive surge of interest in things like Bitcoin and gold? People are subconsciously, or consciously, looking for an exit. They're seeking refuge in assets that can't be printed into oblivion by a government. These are not signs of a healthy financial system. These are classic, textbook symptoms of a currency in the late stages of its life cycle. The entire global financial system is built on the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. But the US is arguably the nation deepest into this four-stage model. When the reserve currency of the world follows this path, it doesn't just affect one country. It pulls the entire global system down with it. Every major currency is a fiat currency, backed by nothing but faith in the government that issues it, and that faith is being eroded daily. History and mathematics are unforgiving. The hyperinflation model isn't a political opinion, it's an observable pattern. A crisis leads to a deficit. The government chooses to print money. They justify it by saying this time is different. But the laws of economics don't change. The printing accelerates, confidence is lost, and the currency enters a death spiral. We've seen it happen time and again. Today, the warning signs are flashing brighter than ever before, not just in one nation, but across the entire developed world, while politicians and central bankers continue to reassure us that everything is under control. The historical model tells a very different, and much more frightening, story. The final stage may be closer than we think. Thanks for watching. If this video made you think, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to see it. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see the signs? Let me know in the comments below. Stay informed, and stay prepared.